It was the kind of afternoon that looked like a painting sunlight slipping through gold-tipped trees, shadows stretching across the lawn. My son was turning 8. His laughter echoed over the music and folding tables while kids ran circles around the park shelter. I remember standing by the drink cooler thinking how peaceful it all felt. Then someone asked where Nathan was. I turned, looked over the yard, and something in my stomach dropped. I couldn't see him. Before we start, hit subscribe to help uncover stories they tried to bury and make sure no name stays forgotten. My name is Elaine Whitmore. I've lived in Maple Hollow, Pennsylvania most of my life, quiet place full of porches and hand-painted mailboxes. Back in '91, I was 34, single mom working front desk at the clinic just off Main Street. Nathan was my only child. Smart as a whip, funny, always had his nose in something, books, bugs, batteries, whatever caught his mind that week. We lived in a little one-story house with red shutters and a crabapple tree out front. My days were simple breakfast with Nathan's school drop-off work, then dinner and cartoons. Weekends we'd bike down to the lake or hit the library. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. That fall, the town had one of those golden stretches where everything feels just right. School was back in session, football flags on every porch, and the leaves had started their slow burn into red and rust. Nathan had just turned 8, and we were planning his party. He wanted a big one that year, balloons, games, the works. I remember he made the invitations himself with little smiley faces in each corner. I helped tape them to his classmates' lockers. Briarwood Park was our spot. Jungle gym, butterfly garden, picnic shelter with long tables you could cover in streamers. I booked it 2 weeks in advance. Donna, my closest friend since middle school, helped me organize the snacks and prizes. She was always the practical one, knew how to wrangle kids and keep things on schedule. We even made matching t-shirts for the party crew, bright green with Nathan's Big 8 across the front. Nathan loved them. The morning of the party, I remember he was bouncing around the kitchen, his teal Game Boy in one hand, the other digging through a cereal box for the prize. I told him to leave the game at home. He didn't listen. We got to the park around 11. Kids started showing up just after. Music from a little boombox, a cooler full of juice boxes, the smell of grilled hot dogs floating from the shelter next door. It was perfect. The kind of day you don't think you'll ever need to remember in sharp detail. Until you do. Looking back, there were small things. Not enough to sound the alarm, but things I didn't like. A man parked too long in the lot. A stranger near the butterfly garden with no kid in sight. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself, it's a public park. People come and go. Around 2 o'clock, I remember walking over to refill the ice bucket. A neighbor waved from the parking lot and asked if I'd seen her daughter's shoe. That's when I glanced over toward the jungle gym. I couldn't see Nathan. At first, I figured he'd just gone behind the trees, or maybe inside the shelter for more chips. But when I checked, he wasn't there either. The Game Boy was gone too. That's the last moment I remember clearly. The exact second where everything shifted and the quiet joy of that afternoon collapsed into a silence I still hear in my sleep. At first I told myself he'd just wandered out of sight, maybe behind the butterfly garden or toward the bathrooms near the parking lot. There were so many kids and so much going on. I wasn't panicked yet. But when I checked the jungle gym and then the picnic shelter, and still couldn't see that teal shirt he insisted on wearing, the feeling in my stomach changed. I started calling his name, not loud, just enough to carry across the grass. Nothing. A few parents looked up. 1 or 2 kids stopped playing. I checked the cooler. I checked the car. I asked Donna. Then I asked everyone. And somewhere in the middle of that slow spread of confusion, I knew. Nathan was gone. The police came fast, and the search lasted well into the night. They brought dogs, flashlights, people from all over town. But by morning there was no trace of him. No footprint. No item left behind. Just his birthday cake untouched, and that empty space where his laughter had been. I lived with that silence for 10 years. I got used to it. Or thought I had. And then one Saturday, Donna rang the bell and convinced me to come with her to a community yard sale across town. It was the first time I'd left my house for anything non-essential in months. She thought the fresh air might help. Said I needed to be around people. I don't think I said yes, but I got in the car anyway. The Lavender Grove neighborhood was only a few blocks over, but I'd never paid much attention to it before. Rows of older homes, lots of hydrangeas and porch swings. It was one of those perfect early fall afternoons, warm sun, just enough wind to make the leaves rattle. People had tables out on their lawns. Kids were sitting on blankets. Someone had a record player going. Donna parked near the end of the street and we just started walking. I didn't expect anything, not really. But I've always liked yard sales. They remind me of time capsules, little moments people left behind. We browsed in silence for a while. I touched a few books. Donna chatted with someone about a lamp. Then I saw it. It was on a folding table near the curb, mixed in with a pile of board games and old VHS tapes. A blue Game Boy. Teal, to be exact. I picked it up before I even realized what I was doing. My hands started shaking. The stickers were still on it. Pikachu in the center, two smaller ones flanking the sides. The exact pattern Nathan had made himself. I could still remember watching him line them up with the tip of his tongue sticking out, concentrating like the fate of the world depended on it. I said his name soft at first. Donna looked at me. What is it? I could barely get the words out. This was his. She looked down at the device, then at me. Are you sure? There's no doubt in my mind. A man behind the table stepped forward, probably in his 70s. He smiled politely at first, but the second he saw my expression, the warmth faded. Can I help you, ladies? I didn't know how to ease into it. Where did you get this? He hesitated. I'm not sure. It's just something I've had around. This belongs to my son, I said. He went missing 10 years ago. This was his. I remember the stickers. I remember everything. His face changed. It wasn't just confusion, it was something tighter, like he was calculating. He reached out and tried to take the Game Boy from my hands. Ma'am, I think you're mistaken. That's just an old toy. They made a lot of those. No, I said louder this time. Please, tell me where you got it. Just tell me where it came from. People were starting to turn. A few shoppers stopped walking. The man who I now knew as Walter Griggs stuffed the Game Boy into his jacket pocket and stepped back. I don't know what you're accusing me of, he said, trying to stay calm but visibly shaken. But I don't appreciate it. Donna touched my arm. Elaine, maybe we should... No, I said. This matters. I reached for the device again. My hand brushed his coat. He pulled away. I'm calling the police, he said, pulling a cell phone from his pocket. I was already shaking, but hearing that broke something. I felt dizzy. My knees buckled. I hit the ground hard enough to bruise, but I barely noticed. Donna knelt beside me. Voices were rising now, people whispering, pointing. I heard someone say, "Isn't that the woman whose boy went missing?" The police arrived within minutes. A young officer helped me to my feet and tried to piece together what had happened. Walter was talking over me, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, that I was creating a scene. I asked them to call the detective who'd worked Nathan's case. I told them his name. Told them I'd never forget it. Within half an hour, Detective Morrison pulled up in an unmarked car. He was older than I remembered, but his eyes hadn't changed. I explained everything, how I recognized the Game Boy, how I knew without a doubt it was Nathan's. He turned to Walter. Sir, he said I need to see that device. Walter resisted at first, said he had rights. But then one of the officers spoke quietly to Morrison, pointing at Walter. That's Sergeant Griggs, retired. Morrison nodded. I remember you, he said. You were a respected officer, but we still need to see that Game Boy. Walter hesitated for a long time. Then finally he reached into his pocket and handed it over. Morrison took it gently like it might break. He pulled out a folder from his car photos from the original investigation. One of them showed Nathan holding that very same Game Boy, stickers and all. I stood still, barely breathing. Morrison compared the device in his hand to the photo. Then he turned back to Walter. "Where did you get this flea market?" Walter said quickly. "Years ago. I don't remember which one." "That's not true," I said. "You were about to say something else. You were going to say, 'my son.' You changed it to 'niece.'" "I heard you." He didn't respond. Morrison asked to search his car and his home. Walter resisted again, then relented. "Fine," he said, "but I don't want her on my property." He pointed at me. "She's not welcome." Morrison looked at me. "You can ride with me," he said. Donna stayed close. We followed the police to Walter's house just a few blocks from the yard sale. White siding, black shutters. Ordinary. The search took over an hour, room by room, closet by closet. But there was nothing. No evidence of a child ever living there. No hidden spaces, no clothing, no notes. Nothing. Morrison handed me a folder. The Game Boy matches. But without DNA or a serial number we can trace, it's not enough. And he says he doesn't know where it came from. "He's lying," I said. "He knows something." Morrison didn't argue, but he didn't confirm anything either. Walter stood on his porch, arms crossed, watching us like we were the problem. Morrison asked to keep the Game Boy. Walter agreed reluctantly, said it was just clutter to him. I asked again. "Are you sure you don't remember who you bought it for?" He paused. "I bought it for my niece." But I saw it in his face. He'd been about to say something else. We drove to the station so I could give a formal statement. A tech took the Game Boy and tested it with fresh batteries. It lit up right away. The startup chime echoed through the room like a ghost. There was a game cartridge inside. I knew it without looking. Pokemon Blue, his favorite. "This is Nathan's," I whispered. "This is his." The tech looked at me gently. "We'll try to pull prints, but don't get your hopes up." Morrison added, "These devices pass through a lot of hands. After 10 years, any evidence could be long gone." I nodded. I understood. But I didn't believe that Game Boy came into Walter's hands by accident. And I couldn't let it go. Not now. Not again. Donna picked me up from the station and drove me home. I thanked her, told her I'd call if anything changed. But that night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept seeing Walter's face, and I couldn't stop thinking about what else might be out there, what else he hadn't said. Something about the way he touched that Game Boy. Like it was personal. Like it meant something. And in the morning I asked Donna to take me back to that yard sale. I didn't tell her what I was hoping for. I just knew the silence was shifting again. And this time I was ready to follow it. I don't think I expected anything when Donna pulled up to the curb that afternoon. I'd told her I wanted to go back and apologize to Walter, to anyone who'd seen what happened at the yard sale. Maybe that was part of it. But really I just couldn't shake the way he'd pulled that Game Boy close. Like he was protecting something. Or someone. When we got there, most of the sellers were packing up. Tables, half-empty, signs coming down. The sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Walter was still there near his car, loading boxes into his trunk with clipped, angry movements. I could feel the tension in my chest before we even got out of the car. Donna asked me one more time if I was sure I wanted to do this. I told her yes. We walked over together. Walter saw us coming and straightened up. His expression didn't soften. "What now?" he said. "Haven't you caused enough of a stir for one day?" I told him I was sorry. That I shouldn't have made a scene in front of the neighbors. That I just reacted too strongly and it wasn't fair to him. He didn't really respond, just stared at me for a long second and said, "I hope people don't get the wrong idea." Then he slammed the trunk shut and walked back toward his table to grab the last of his things. I wanted to say more, maybe ask another question, but Donna put her hand on my arm and gave me a quiet look. So we turned back toward her car. I don't know why we didn't leave right away. Maybe we were waiting for a sign, something to give us permission to keep digging. And then it happened. A green Volkswagen pulled up to the curb right next to Walter's car, the same one we'd followed earlier. The younger man stepped out mid-20s, maybe a little older. Short dark hair, heavy boots, same stiff posture. He walked straight toward Walter, who had returned with a box in his arms. Whatever conversation they were having, it wasn't friendly. Walter shoved the box at him hard enough that a few items spilled onto the pavement. Toy cars, old game cards, something colorful that looked like a keychain. The younger man dropped to his knees, gathering them quickly. His shoulders were tense. Walter said something sharp enough that I caught it even through the closed car door. "I don't care. It's not mine. Do what you want for the sake of your mother." Donna had cracked her window a little, just enough for the breeze to carry more of it. I didn't catch everything, but the tone was unmistakable. Defensive, frustrated, final. The younger man didn't reply. He just shook his head once, twice, like he was trying to shake something off, then walked away with the box. He loaded it into the back of the Volkswagen, slammed the trunk shut, and peeled away from the curb without looking back. Donna and I just sat there, both of us quiet. "That's his son," I said finally. "Has to be." She nodded. He said, "Your mother." I looked out toward the intersection where the car had disappeared. That box was full of toys. If he was cleaning out someone's childhood things, maybe that Game Boy came from him too. Donna didn't argue. We waited a moment longer, then I asked the question that had already formed in both our minds. What if we follow him again? Not to scare him, just to see where he goes. Donna sighed, already reaching for the keys. "If we're doing this," she said, "we stay in the car. We don't talk to anyone unless we have to." The Volkswagen was easy to spot once we turned the corner. That bubble green shape stood out. We kept our distance. The car didn't go far, just a few miles past Maple Hollow into the commercial strip where all the holiday pop-up stores were. It pulled into the lot of a Halloween shop I hadn't seen before. Black building, purple trim, fog machines in the window display. "Dark Delights Party Emporium," Donna read aloud. But we couldn't make the turn in time. Traffic pushed us forward, and by the time we circled back, the man was already coming out of the store. 2 large bags in his hands. He was walking fast, like he didn't want to be seen. Before we could get close, he jumped into the car and reversed so suddenly that Donna had to hit the brakes hard to avoid a collision. "He saw us," she said. "I wasn't sure." But he wasn't driving casually anymore. He cut across lanes, weaving around cars, picking up speed. Then we heard the railroad bells. The crossing gates started to lower just as his Volkswagen slipped under them. We had to stop. I watched his taillights disappear through the blur of freight cars. That train felt like it lasted forever. By the time it cleared, we had no way of knowing which way he went. Donna pulled over at the split in the road, eyes scanning left, right, straight. Nothing. No sign of him. "It's gone," I said. "We lost him." She gripped the wheel, thinking. "We should tell the police. About the argument, the toy box." I nodded. "We will." But part of me wasn't ready to let it go. We drove back toward the Halloween store in silence. As we passed, I noticed a banner hanging outside, something about a sale. "Maybe we should go in," I said, "since we're here anyway." Donna looked at me. "To shop, to see what's inside. Maybe he left something behind." She agreed, and we pulled into the lot. A young man with bleached hair and a cigarette was crouched near the entrance. He raised a hand in greeting and said he'd be inside in a minute. We stepped through the glass doors into something that didn't belong in a town like ours. Horror masks, animatronics, fog machines that hissed softly from floor vents. Donna wandered off toward the kids' costumes. I stayed near the register, taking it all in. Then something odd happened. Donna picked up a costume for her niece, purple sparkly shaped like a little witch's gown. She placed it on the edge of the checkout counter and turned to find the clerk. But the fabric slipped, falling behind the counter onto a desk with a laptop open. I moved forward to retrieve it just as the edge of my hand brushed the keyboard. A video started to play. Grainy, dark, woods at night. The camera shook like someone was holding it while running. Then a man's face filled the frame briefly, clearly. "What do you think?" he asked, and the clip ended. I didn't say anything at first, just stared at the screen. I recognized the face. It was the man from the parking lot, Walter's son. The young clerk came in just as I stepped back. He froze when he saw me near the laptop. "Were you snooping?" he snapped. "That's private. I could call the police." I told him the truth. Calmly, carefully. That my son had disappeared 10 years ago. That I'd just seen the man in the video outside this very store. That the name Nathan had appeared on his screen bold and highlighted in a chat window. At first he pushed back. Said Nathan wasn't a rare name. Said I was making a scene. But when Donna stepped in and quietly mentioned the police, his whole posture changed. He started shaking. "His name's Derek," he said. "I just sell him stuff. He comes here to prep for parties." I didn't know anything else. "Please don't get me in trouble." He reopened the chat window. I leaned in. It was from a Yahoo Messenger group called Scary Fun Party. The messages were about a surprise for Nathan. References to fear visuals, lighting setups, strobe effects. There was an address. I wrote it down. The clerk begged us not to involve the authorities. Said he was on probation, just trying to keep his job. But I couldn't promise anything. I stepped outside and called the station, told them my name, told them I had something related to my son's case. When I turned to go back inside, I caught sight of the store's front display, 5 plastic masks arranged in a perfect row. Blank faces, wide smiles, like they were waiting for someone, like they already knew. The dispatcher took my report without interruption. Her voice calm and procedural, the kind I'd heard too many times in the first few months after Nathan disappeared. But when I mentioned the Yahoo Messenger chat, the name Nathan, the strobe lights, the address, there was a change in tone. She asked me to stay on the line. I stood just outside the Halloween store, the sky dimming behind me, Donna pacing nearby, arms folded tight across her chest. Within 15 minutes, I could hear sirens coming down the main road. 3 cruisers pulled into the lot, followed by an unmarked car I recognized right away. Detective Morrison stepped out before it had even stopped moving. I hadn't seen him move that quickly in years. I met him halfway across the pavement and told him everything. The video, the name, Derek, the store clerk's reaction, the chat messages, the address. He asked me to repeat it twice. One of the officers was already speaking with the clerk inside. From the look on his face, the young man was terrified. Hands shaking, head ducked like he wanted to disappear. He says he knows Derek Morrison told me. Says they've talked off and on for a few months, mostly about party gear. But he didn't know anything about a missing child. Says it was just a themed event. I nodded slowly, but I didn't believe it. Not completely. "Did he give you the address?" "We got it," Morrison said. He turned toward one of the cruisers and signaled. "It's a property just outside Ash Hollow. Apparently belonged to Walter Griggs' family, Derek's father." I looked at Donna, then back at Morrison. "Are we going there?" He didn't answer right away. Then he nodded. "You can ride with me. Stay in the car when we arrive." The drive out of town was quiet. The city lights faded behind us, replaced by long stretches of road that dipped between dense trees and open farmland. I watched the forest thicken the shapes of bare branches tracing lines against the darkening sky. Morrison's radio crackled to life with confirmation Walter admitted the property was his, though he claimed he hadn't been out there in years. Said he thought it had been boarded up and forgotten. He didn't know his son was using it, Morrison said flatly. That's what he claims. The road narrowed until it was no more than a strip of gravel through the woods. Then we saw it. A small, weathered cottage, 2 stories high but sagging at the edges, the kind of place that once had purpose but had long since been abandoned. We parked behind the Volkswagen. It was there, half crooked in the dirt back tires tilted as if it had been parked in a hurry. Other vehicles, too. 2 sedans, a van with its back doors shut tight. But not a single person in sight. Morrison told me and Donna to stay in the car. I nodded, but the moment he and the officers stepped inside, I opened the door. I didn't move far, just close enough to hear. The front door was hanging open, one hinge broken. The interior was dark. Morrison and his team entered slowly, their voices low and controlled. I held on to the edge of the car door and listened. Then a sound behind the house. Faint at first music laughter, a high voice shouting something unintelligible. Donna heard it too. She stood beside me now, still as stone. One of the officers emerged and gestured toward the back of the house. Morrison followed, flashlight in hand. Stay here, he said again, looking at us directly. But I couldn't. I stepped forward just enough to see through a cracked pane near the rear. Past the porch, down a narrow path lined with brush and vines, there were flickering lights. Someone had strung colored bulbs between the trees, and beneath them just barely visible figures were moving. I heard music again, an eerie synthesized melody that didn't sound like a party, more like a performance. Then came the command. Police hands where we can see them. The music stopped. Shouts echoed through the trees. For a moment it was chaos. Cries, movement, something falling hard against the ground. Morrison's voice cut through firm and level. Then silence. One of the officers returned and directed us away from the house. Please, ma'am, wait near the vehicles. For your own safety. I stepped back with Donna. We stood together just beyond the porch as the minutes stretched long and uncertain. The woods behind the house were dark again, except for the police flashlights sweeping through. Then figures began to emerge, one by one escorted by officers. Men dressed in torn clothing with makeup smeared across their faces, pale skin, fake blood gory prosthetics. I thought at first it was some kind of costume rehearsal. But then I saw their faces. Some were laughing, others were not. One of them, Derek, looked straight at me as they walked him to the car. He didn't look surprised, just angry. You ruined it, he said. His voice was flat hollow. We were just having fun. Morrison was close behind him. When the men were secured in the cruisers, he came over and looked at me with a different kind of urgency. We found someone, he said. In the woods. He says his name is Nathan. My knees nearly buckled. Donna reached for my arm. He's shaken up. Morrison continued. He won't let us come close. Says he's scared. That we're not real. Take me to him, I said. He led me down the path, flashlights guiding the way. 50 yards from the back of the house, near a fire pit still smoldering, a young man was crouched low to the ground, rocking gently, arms wrapped over his head. His jeans were wet. His voice trembled. You're all infected, he kept saying. They turned you. They turned everyone. I stepped forward slowly, my hands open. Nathan, I said. It's Mom. He didn't move, just kept rocking. You're not her, he whispered. She died. They told me. They all died. I crouched beside him. No, sweetheart. I'm here. You're safe now. For a moment, nothing changed. Then he lifted his head. His face was gaunt, dirty. His eyes, wide pupils, dilated. But even through the 10 years of age and pain I knew, the shape of his mouth, the angle of his chin, It was Nathan. His hand twitched toward mine. "Mom?" "Yes," I said. "It's really me." Behind us, an officer whispered something to Morrison. Something about drugs. Hallucinogens. They thought he'd been given something to make the scenes more real, but I didn't look away from Nathan. I held his hand and told him again, "You're safe. You're coming home." He looked past me, scanning the trees. "What if they're still out there?" he asked. "What if they come back tonight?" I squeezed his hand. "They won't." He nodded slowly, still trembling, still broken open. But he didn't pull away. Morrison signaled the medics who had been standing by. They approached with calm voices and a stretcher. Nathan tensed again, so I stayed close. Told him it was okay, that I'd ride with him, that we were going to a real hospital with real lights and real people and no monsters. He let them help him. As we walked back toward the vehicles, I glanced once at the cottage, its porch sagging, the windows hollow. No answers came from it, just the echo of what had been buried for years. As they loaded Nathan into the ambulance and Donna climbed in beside me, I caught one last glimpse of Derek sitting behind the glass of the cruiser, his face unreadable. There were still things I didn't understand, but I knew this much. Whatever story he'd told my son, whatever world he'd built out there in the woods, it was over now. Or at least it was starting to be. The ambulance was quiet except for the soft beeping from the monitor and the faint shuffle of the paramedics moving around us. I sat beside Nathan, still holding his hand. His body had gone slack, the sedative finally pulling him under, but his fingers twitched every so often like he was dreaming something he couldn't wake from. Donna sat across from me near the rear doors, watching with that same still concern she always had, never overbearing, never panicked, just steady. The hospital lights were already coming into view when the lead paramedic leaned toward me and said gently, "We'll need to move quickly once we get inside. There's going to be a team ready." I nodded. I didn't need reassurance. I just needed them to help him. The moment we entered the emergency bay, everything blurred. Nurses' voices, movement, a curtain drawn between us. Someone telling me to wait. I barely heard them. I only let go of his hand because they made me. Donna guided me to a waiting room tucked away from the main hallway. It smelled like disinfectant and stale coffee. I sat down in one of the plastic chairs, folded my hands in my lap, and stared at the floor. The last time I was in a hospital like this, Nathan was 5. He'd broken his wrist falling off the monkey bars at school. He didn't cry until the nurse brought out the IV needle. That memory hit hard, now, sharp and clean, like something frozen in amber. I don't know how much time passed before the door opened and a doctor stepped inside. He was older, with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice that had seen enough not to rush. He introduced himself as Dr. Peterson, then lowered himself into the seat across from me. "Nathan is stable," he said. "He's still under the influence of what we believe to be a synthetic hallucinogen, possibly a compound similar to NBOMe or something homemade. We've started a full toxicology screen. I asked if he'd been hurt, really hurt." The doctor shook his head. "No obvious signs of physical trauma, which is good. But he's severely undernourished, dehydrated. The psychological damage will take time to understand." I felt Donna's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. Dr. Peterson said they'd moved Nathan to a private room and would notify me when he was awake, and then he paused like he was weighing something. He kept repeating one name when he came in. He said, "Derek." That was the moment it clicked. That name again. I didn't know the full story yet, but I knew it mattered. I thanked the doctor and waited. Another 20 minutes, maybe 30, and Morrison arrived. He came in quietly, still in the same jacket from the woods, a file folder in his hand. "We've spoken with Derek," he said, pulling up a chair beside mine. He didn't hold back. That's the strange part. He wasn't trying to cover anything. He told us what he did. I sat forward. I don't know if I was ready, but I didn't ask him to stop. "He says he took Nathan on his 8th birthday, Morrison said. Told us he'd been watching the party at Briarwood Park from a distance. Waited for a moment when your attention was on the other kids. Said he offered Nathan a game, some kind of secret spy mission. Said your son followed him without hesitation. I closed my eyes. That sounded like Nathan. Trusting, curious, wanting to be part of something bigger than himself. He gave him liquid allergy medication, Morrison continued. Just enough to knock him out. Carried him out of the park and into the woods where he'd parked his car off a side trail. Took him to an old house his father had forgotten they even owned. I asked if it was the same property we found him at. Morrison nodded. Same place. Derek says he spent the first few months convincing Nathan that the world had ended. Told him there'd been a virus, that the people at the party had been infected, that you'd died. I didn't say anything. I couldn't. He told the boy they were survivors, Morrison said, that they had to stay hidden, that if Nathan ever left the property, the infected would find him, and he believed it, for years. I asked why. What made someone do that to a child? Morrison didn't offer an answer. He says Nathan was his little brother from a past life, that they were meant to be together. It's delusional, but he believes it. I looked over at Donna, who hadn't said a word. Her face was pale but composed. Morrison flipped through the folder, then paused. Derek raised him like it was a new beginning, he said. Taught him what he thought he should know. Kept him out of sight. Fed him lies. I asked about the parties, the group chat, the video. Morrison nodded. He says that was Nathan's idea. He got older, started asking questions. Wanted to meet people, help others. Derek convinced him they'd host simulations, survivor drills, he called them. He brought in a few friends who thought it was just immersive horror. Dressed up like zombies. Strobe lights, fake fog, sound effects. But Nathan didn't know it was fake. Morrison shook his head. He was drugged before every event, made to believe it was real. He thought they were under attack, that it was practice for surviving the outbreak. The party we interrupted was just another version, but this time Nathan panicked. He thought the people dressed as zombies had turned, that it was over. I let that sink in. All the pieces felt sharp, like broken glass in my chest. He believed it was all real, I said. For 10 years. Yes, Morrison said. He did. I asked about Walter, if he'd known. Morrison leaned back, his voice quieter. We brought him in, sat him down. He claims he didn't know. Says he hadn't seen Derek in months, that he found suspicious things in the past, images, documents, hints that something wasn't right, but never followed through. And the Game Boy, I asked. The way he hid it. Morrison didn't answer right away. Then he said, that's part of what we're trying to understand. It may be guilt, or fear, or something else entirely. A soft knock on the door interrupted us. Dr. Peterson stepped back into the room, his expression gentler than before. Nathan's awake, he said. He's asking for you. I stood quickly, steadied myself, then followed him through the corridor. The room was dim, a single lamp glowing near the corner. Nathan was sitting up, his hands folded in his lap, eyes flickering around the room like he wasn't sure where he was. I stepped forward, careful, quiet. It's me, I said. Mom. He looked at me for a long time. Then slowly he said, I thought you were dead. I told him no, that I'd never stopped looking, that I was here now. His voice trembled. There were so many lies. I don't know what's real anymore. I sat beside him, placed my hand over his. This is real, I said. You're safe now. He didn't answer, but he didn't pull away either. His shoulders sagged and he leaned against me just barely, like someone testing the strength of a wall before leaning all the way in. I stayed there with him. Quiet. Still. Letting the silence hold what words couldn't. Outside the room, Morrison waited with more questions. But those could wait. For now, I had the first piece back. And for the first time in a decade, I felt the faintest pulse of something I thought I'd lost. Not peace. Not yet, but maybe the start of it. Nathan drifted in and out of sleep the rest of that night, waking to the sound of nurses' shoes on linoleum, or the hush of machines keeping watch over his pulse. I stayed by his bedside, reading each flicker of his eyelids, every shiver that ran through his body, as if the past decade of my life depended on it, which in a way it had. Donna dozed in a corner chair, arms wrapped tight around herself. Now and then she would look up at me with that steady presence I'd leaned on so many times before, a silent anchor holding me in place. Every hour, someone new in a blue or green uniform stepped into the room. Doctors, detectives, social workers, faces I'd never seen before. And some I remembered from that first terrible night. The questions came gently at first about Nathan's physical health, what he'd been told all those years, whether he could remember anyone else who had visited the cottage. But as night pressed in, the atmosphere in that hospital room changed. Morrison returned, this time accompanied by another officer and a thick folder. He asked to speak with me in the hallway. Out there, the world felt colder and emptier, like nothing existed except for the hum of vending machines and the scuff of sneakers down the corridor. Morrison started with what they'd learned so far. Derek had been taken into custody, and though he rambled in circles about his brotherhood with Nathan and the end of the world, he wasn't resisting. He talked openly about keeping Nathan hidden, about the elaborate games, the zombie drills, the so-called survivors' parties. He'd even drawn diagrams for police maps of escape routes, stockpile stories he'd told Nathan over and over until truth and fiction blurred together. But none of that explained why, or what had really happened on the nights when Nathan was most frightened. Morrison said they needed my help now. "We have gaps," he said. "There are pieces missing, especially from the last few years." He showed me the chat logs they'd pulled from the Halloween store clerk's computer messages between Derek and several local contacts, invitations to gatherings on the property, requests for props and sound equipment. Some people had come and gone, thinking they were just taking part in another small-town scarefest. But others... Morrison didn't finish the thought. Instead, he asked me to walk him through every memory I had from the weeks before Nathan vanished anyone new in our neighborhood, any unusual vehicles, any conversations with parents I hadn't thought much of at the time. We pieced it together hour by hour. My mind kept circling back to small things, a neighbor's broken fence, a stranger at the grocery store who asked too many questions, the time Nathan said someone was watching him from the edge of the schoolyard. I remembered brushing it off. It's just the wind, I'd told him. Just the imagination of a little boy. Morrison wrote everything down. He said they would run checks. He asked if I was ready to visit the cottage for case closure, he called it. I said yes, though my legs trembled the entire drive. It was early morning, cold enough that my breath fogged the car window as we turned down the gravel road. The woods felt different in daylight, less threatening, but somehow sadder, as if every tree remembered a secret I couldn't quite reach. The police had cleared the house, but it was still ringed in yellow tape. I walked the halls with Morrison and a detective from the state unit, gloves on our hands, not touching anything we didn't have to. The kitchen was exactly as we'd left it, an old table plates stacked haphazardly, a single fork resting beside a can of beans. Upstairs, the bedrooms were empty except for a few faded blankets and a stack of comic books, most of them water-damaged and curling at the corners. Downstairs was different. The basement door was bolted and painted the same color as the trim. Morrison handed me a flashlight. The stairs creaked with every step. Down there, the air was close and stale, tinged with the scent of mold and something chemical beneath it. The basement was finished in places. Someone had put up cheap paneling, hung blackout curtains over the narrow windows, lined the walls with old posters of superhero movies and apocalyptic video games. In one corner, a small bed. In another, boxes of non-perishable food. The far end held shelves cluttered with board games, puzzles, and makeshift science kits, things a parent might buy for a child to keep him entertained. But the piece that caught me was a crude mural painted directly onto the foundation wall. Bright blue sky-green hills, and in the center, a woman's face with red hair, mine, though it looked younger, idealized. Over her head, the words, "Home Safe," painted in black block letters. I had to kneel. For a moment, I forgot everyone else in the room. I touched the wall, ran my hand over the paint. That was how Derek kept Nathan from escaping, I realized. Promises of a mother's safety, a world waiting outside only when it was safe to leave. Lies layered on top of hope until the two became the same thing. Morrison said softly, "We think this is where he spent most of his time." The windows were painted shut. "There's soundproofing in the ceiling." I nodded. There was more, too. On a shelf, a row of old notebooks, pages filled with handwriting that shifted from careful block letters to frantic, uneven scrawls. Notes about survival recipes, plans for fake missions, and quarantines. I recognized Nathan's handwriting, among them small, precise, the kind he used on birthday cards. Morrison gathered what he needed for evidence. I stood there longer than I meant to, letting it all settle in. When we finished, I asked if I could see the rest of the property. Outside, frost lingered on the grass, the sun barely warming the edges of the trees. I found the path that led to the clearing where the parties had been held, where I'd last seen Nathan trembling by the fire pit. There were fragments of fake bones and rubber masks scattered in the weeds, bits of colored glass from broken bulbs. I picked up a toy car, rusted, faded red. Morrison looked at it, then at me. He kept everything he said. Wouldn't throw anything away. I slipped the car into my pocket just to have something of Nathan's from that lost world. Back at the hospital, the therapists had started working with Nathan. He barely spoke at first, but when he did, his voice was soft and uncertain, like he was learning to talk all over again. Sometimes he would look at me and ask questions that made no sense. "Are you real, or is the world fixed yet?" I answered the same way every time, calm and steady. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm real. We're safe. You're home." Some nights I caught him staring at the window, flinching at shadows. I'd sit with him until the sun came up, our silence heavy but not unbearable. It was in those quiet hours, watching him wrestle with memory and fear, that I realized the long road ahead for him, for me, for anyone who loved him. There was still so much I didn't know. But I understood this much: whatever darkness Derek had dragged us into, we would face it piece by piece, truth by truth, until there was nothing left to hide. And just before dawn, as the world outside finally began to lighten, I felt something shift. A door opening somewhere I couldn't see yet. An answer waiting quiet and patient just beyond the next sunrise. After all those hours in the hospital, with the day slipping past in measured footsteps and the ache of waiting, it was Detective Morrison who came to find me. He spoke quietly at first, as if unsure how much weight I could carry after everything. "Walter Griggs wants to talk," he said. "He's at the station. Says he's ready to answer questions." I nodded, not trusting my voice. Donna offered to wait with Nathan, and I followed Morrison out through the hospital's automatic doors into the brittle November air. The drive to the station was silent, except for the rumble of the heater and the soft static of the radio voices drifting in and out on the edge of reception. The police station hadn't changed in 10 years. Same brick walls, same threadbare waiting room chairs, the same echo in the hallway. They put us in a small consultation room with a round table and 2 metal chairs on each side. Walter was already there, looking smaller than I remembered, shrunken into his coat, a man weathered not just by age but by something heavier. He wouldn't look at me at first. His hands kept moving, nodding and unnodding on the tabletop. Morrison sat beside me, silent except for the click of his pen. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Walter took a shaky breath and started. "I want to apologize," he said, voice rough. "I swear to you I never knew. Not until this morning. Not really." I watched him closely, waiting for the usual protest or deflection, but none came. I knew Derek had problems, Walter said. Obsession with kids, always wanting to play the hero or the villain. I found things on his computer, once strange chat rooms images I didn't understand. But I told myself he'd grow out of it. His voice faltered. When you came to that yard sale, when you recognized the Game Boy, I panicked. I thought maybe Derek had bullied someone, maybe stolen something. But kidnapping, never. He met my eyes, then watery blue, pleading for something I didn't have to give. When the police started searching my house, I realized he'd lied to me too. I saw the truth in your face, not in his. Morrison asked about the property, about how much Walter had visited, about the years it stood empty. Walter answered quietly. He'd avoided it, he said, after his wife died. Couldn't bring himself to go back. Signed the taxes, let the weeds grow. Never questioned where Derek spent his time. You tried to protect him, I said. My voice sounded flat, even to me. Even after you saw what he was capable of. Walter shook his head, hands shaking now. I was wrong. I see that now. I can't make it right, but I'm sorry. Morrison turned the conversation back to the evidence, how Derek accessed the cottage where he bought supplies. Who else might have known? Walter answered as best he could, but most of his words trailed off into apology or self-reproach. When it was done, Morrison closed his notebook. Walter sat unmoving until an officer came to escort him away. I didn't speak. I watched him go, the door closing with a soft click, and felt only the cold settling in my bones. Morrison asked if I needed a minute. I shook my head. There was nothing left in that room for me. The rest of the day passed in a blur, police statements, paperwork, calls from social workers and lawyers. Each time I returned to the hospital, I found Nathan awake, eyes clearer than before, but still searching every shadow. The doctors said he was recovering physically. The worst of the drugs were gone from his system. They started letting him walk the halls with a nurse sunlight on his face for the first time in years. That afternoon, Dr. Peterson called me aside. He remembers some things the doctor said. You'll need to take it slow. Reality is still coming back in pieces. So I sat with Nathan and answered every question he had, even the impossible ones, why he'd been taken, how the world had changed, what was real and what wasn't. He wanted to know if there were still zombies out there. I told him no, as gently as I could. I showed him the scar on my wrist from when he was 5. You gave me that, I said the day you rode your scooter off the porch. He looked at me a long time, then reached out to touch the scar as if testing the past with his own hands. I could see the doubt in his eyes slowly turning to belief. The investigators came again. Morrison explained what they'd found in the basement, the painted mural, the notebooks, the plans Derek had made. They found receipts for the Halloween gear sketches for the fake zombie attacks, schedules for when the parties would be held. Each detail filled in another piece of the nightmare Nathan had lived through. There was one more meeting before the day ended. Morrison asked if I'd speak with the store clerk, Tony, one more time. He was still frightened, still afraid he'd go to jail. But he told us about the day Derek came in and asked for help designing a real scare, how he'd sold him fog machines and special lighting, how he'd thought it was just a Halloween prank. Tony handed over the last receipt dated the week Nathan was found. The last clue. When it was done, I walked the empty hallway outside Nathan's room, feeling the weight of it all pressing in from every side. I passed by the family waiting area, where a mother was holding her daughter's hand, reading softly from a picture book. The girl's laughter drifted out into the hall light, and pure, so different from the silence I'd been living in. That's when I realized what Derek had taken wasn't just my son, but the very idea of safety, the promise that the world would always make sense. That night, after the hospital quieted and Nathan finally slept, I stood by his bed listening to his slow, even breathing. Morrison called one last time, his voice low and certain. "It's over," he said. "He won't hurt anyone else." I thanked him. I stayed at the window for a long time, watching the glow of the parking lot lights fade into the dark, feeling the truth settle into place, heavy but final. I wasn't sure what came next. I only knew that we had made it through the dark and that whatever pieces were left to gather, I'd find them one at a time until the whole story was told. The next few weeks blurred into one long procession of questions, statements, and meetings. Once the detectives had everything they needed from Nathan's room, they turned to the courts and, soon after that, to the prosecutors. Derek was charged on multiple counts: kidnapping, false imprisonment, aggravated assault, and a dozen lesser charges that, taken together, seemed to weigh heavier than any sentence could really hold. There was never any doubt he'd be convicted, not after the evidence found in the basement, the chat logs, and the testimonies. I didn't attend every hearing, but the one time I saw him in court, he looked straight ahead, neither seeking me out nor shrinking from what he'd done. There were other faces in the courtroom, too. Families of those who had come to the zombie parties, local parents, a couple of teachers. No one seemed to know what to say or how to sit with the truth of what had happened so close to home. When the verdict came, it was delivered in a tone I'll never forget, final but not triumphant. Derek was sentenced to life in prison with no chance for parole for at least 40 years. I didn't feel relief, not really. It wasn't that kind of story. It was just an end to a chapter. Tony, the clerk from the party store, gave a full statement and was cleared of any wrongdoing. He started showing up at his probation check-ins early, even volunteering at the community center. Some of Derek's friends who'd been at those so-called parties were questioned. Most hadn't realized what they were part of. The district attorney said there would be no charges for the guests who didn't know, just a warning, a hard lesson about trust and appearances. Walter Griggs, though, lost more than just his son. The department took back his badge quietly, and a month later he moved to another town. I saw him once at the grocery store, looking smaller, older. He nodded at me, but didn't come any closer. For Nathan, the path forward was different. The hospital released him after 2 weeks of observation and therapy, and I brought him home to Maple Hollow. The house looked exactly as it always had, but Nathan walked through it as if everything was new, tracing the walls with his fingertips, pausing at each window. We took it slow. The therapists came every few days, soft-spoken and patient, helping him relearn things most 18-year-olds take for granted. He'd ask me sometimes, "Are we safe here? Are you sure?" And I'd answer every time with the same words, because sometimes truth has to be repeated for the heart to believe it. Donna stayed close, helping with groceries, driving us to appointments. Neighbors brought casseroles and cards. Most didn't know what to say, but they tried. There were nights Nathan couldn't sleep, and I'd find him sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at the place where the moonlight touched the carpet. He was still afraid of the dark, and sometimes the sound of laughter from outside would send him to the window, searching for a threat only he could see. The police checked in once more, mostly to tie up loose ends. Detective Morrison came by in person, sitting at our kitchen table, hat in hand. He told Nathan he was brave, that not many people could survive what he'd been through. Nathan looked at him for a long moment before saying in a quiet voice, "I just want to be normal now." The doctor said it would be a long recovery, that the trauma wouldn't vanish with the verdict or the sunlight or the passing days. Some scars run too deep to fade, but the routines helped: schoolwork at the kitchen table, slow walks around the block. Breakfast together every morning, even if Nathan barely touched his food. He got a letter from a friend who'd moved away before he disappeared. That meant more to him than he let on. I could see it in the way he reread it, lips moving silently over the words. The news moved on. Another story, another tragedy. But our lives remained paused, hovering between the world we'd lost and whatever waited ahead. There were still moments when the pain hit fresh, like when I found the old Game Boy sealed now in an evidence bag, but returned to us by the police. Nathan didn't want to touch it at first. Later he asked to hold it just once. He traced the stickers with his thumb, silent for a long time, then put it in the drawer next to his bed. The last time Morrison visited, he left us with a folder, a copy of the case file pictures, timelines, his card. "You ever need anything?" he said. "Just call." I thanked him, but I knew what we really needed wasn't something a detective could bring. One night as I turned off the lights and checked the locks for the third time, Nathan spoke from his doorway. "Why did he pick me?" he asked. I stood there feeling the heaviness of all the answers I didn't have. I told him I didn't know. I promised I would never let anyone hurt him again. He nodded, not smiling, but not broken either. In the end, justice was served at least as much as it ever can be. But closure is just a word, not a finish line. The scars linger and the shadows are still there when the house grows quiet. But each day in small ways we learn to move through them together and towards something like peace, even if it's fragile, even if it's slow. Some stories never really end, even when the headlines fade and the house grows quiet again. In the weeks after the sentencing, I kept waiting for a day when everything would feel normal, when Nathan would come downstairs just a little lighter when I'd make coffee in the morning and not reach for the phone out of habit, half expecting news or a call from the detective. But normal isn't something you return to after a loss like ours. It's something you remake slowly, piece by piece. Nathan and I settled into a rhythm that felt almost new, walking to the mailbox together, watching the seasons change out the window, learning what it meant to live in the present without always scanning for danger. There were setbacks, of course. Nathan had nightmares that left him shaking and silent. And sometimes I'd wake to find him sitting on the stairs as if afraid to move forward or back. But there were good days, too. The first time he laughed at a joke Donna told over dinner. The afternoon he asked to visit the park where he'd last seen the sun as a child, just to see it with his own eyes. Those moments became our mile markers, small victories measured in ordinary hours. Justice was served the only way the law allows. Derek will spend the rest of his life behind bars, and whatever power he once held over our lives is gone now. But real justice, the kind people talk about in whispers when the news cameras leave, is quieter and more complicated. It's not just about punishment, but about what comes after, how you rebuild trust, how you relearn the shape of hope. I think a part of me will always grieve for what was stolen, not just from Nathan, but from every parent who's ever lost a child even for a day. There are birthdays we'll never get back, school years he'll never know, and a childhood that exists now only in memory and photographs. That's a weight I'll always carry, but it isn't the only thing left. Donna never left our side. She became family in ways that matter most, not in blood, but in the showing up, the gentle reminders to eat the late-night talks when sleep just wouldn't come. Walter Griggs, in his own way, disappeared from our lives for good. I sometimes wonder if he ever found peace, or if his silence is just another form of sorrow. Nathan is finding his own way. Every morning he wakes up to a world that for a long time he thought was gone. There are still days he gets lost in old fears or forgets for a moment that the world is safe. But he's learning with each passing week that it's okay to reach for joy again. We're learning together. If there's one lesson I take from all this, it's that resilience isn't loud or dramatic. It's the quiet refusal to let darkness have the final word. It's holding on even when hope is just a thread. Most of all, it's understanding that survival means more than just being found. It means choosing to live day after day, even when the world has changed you. Thank you for listening to our story. If it stayed with you, I hope you'll share it or simply remember that behind every headline is a family learning to live with what was lost and what was found. And if you need a reminder that healing is possible even after years in the dark, let this be it.